There's a lot of attention at the moment on stress. It's become quite a hot topic. I think everybody has felt it, everybody's had an experience of stress. But at the moment, we're starting to focus on just how much of an issue it is and all the negative results of stress, not just emotionally and psychologically, but physically. We're really starting to see that it has a terribly negative impact on people and on companies and organizations. I mean, the loss in sick days alone is absolutely massive. So we're much, much more aware of it. The problem is we really don't have an answer for it. So there's building awareness that it's a really bad thing, but no answer for it. And one of the problems is people are starting to conclude that it's a necessary or a normal result of the kind of lives that we lead. The busyness in our work lives and our home lives and the amount of technology that we're using. So on the one hand, we have a helpful part where we're starting to realize stress is very prevalent and very negative, but an unhelpful part where we kind of assume we're stuck with it because of our lifestyles. And this assumption, which I'm going to suggest is a misunderstanding, leads to the idea that there's nothing you can do about stress because it comes from the kind of lives that we lead. So you only have two options. Live a different kind of life, move to the country, get a less demanding job, or manage the stress that you have. So there's a lot of focus on stress management, yoga, taking time off, and sort of offloading the stress that's seen to be a natural buildup of the stimulus in our daily lives. Well, what I want to introduce to you is the idea that stress is not a result of our external circumstances, but is an experience of what's going on in our own minds. And the reason I would suggest that is because we experience stress as a feeling. And this is hard for people to see. If you talk to people about stress, they immediately talk about their circumstances because they assume it's the circumstances that are causing the stress. So you say, well, I have a lot of stress, I have a deadline, I have a lot to do, I have a family, somebody's ill. Whereas if you really look at it, how do you know you're stressed? You feel it. The other thing I want to suggest to you is that feelings come from our mind. They don't come from the outside. There's no Wi-Fi downloading feelings from your external circumstances. It's not a hormone in the environment that when you get closer to work, you feel more tense. It's happening in the mind of the person. And that's true for all feelings. All feelings are an experience of the person's thought. And that's why as you start to think about whatever it is that gets you stressed, perhaps it's work, on Sunday night you start to feel it. You haven't even put your shirt and tie on. And many people start to feel stress reducing at 3 o'clock on Friday. They're still at work. So this starts to highlight where stress comes from. It's a feeling, it comes from our mind, right? Now, once you realize that stress is an experience of our own minds, you can deal with it in a different way. Instead of avoiding what you think causes it or managing it once you have it, you can absolutely address it at the point of origin, which is in the thought that created it. And we have freedom to relate to any thought we have in any way. Just think about the feeling of being hungry. You're sitting at your desk, you feel hungry, that's a thought. You might have been hungry half an hour before, but it's not until you have a thought that you're aware of it. And as you well know, you can focus on that thought and become hungrier and hungrier and more desperate to eat and completely lose track of what you're doing. Or you can think to yourself, I'm not going to worry about that now, I'm going to get on with my work. In which case, even though you're biologically hungry, you don't feel it until you think about it again. Well, the feeling of stress is generated in exactly the same way. It's a feeling that creates a thought. And the more we think about that thought, the stronger the feeling gets. And the less we think about that thought, it comes and goes. Think about a deadline. Often people say they worry or think about the deadline, they feel more and more pressure, and there comes a point at which you have to do the work. And many people forget about the worry of it and get on with it. And in that moment, the stress disappears and they just do the work. And then it's done. Now, when the deadline's done, they feel enormous relief because they don't think they need to worry about it. It's the feeling that we need to worry about things, or that it helps to worry about things, or that if you have a lot to do, you need to think of them all. And that leads to us thinking in a very agitated way, and that agitated thinking is what stress is. If you pull back the curtain on the feeling, there's a lot of agitated thinking having a party in your head, and you're the one thinking it. And if you step back and look at it, you'll see that's true, that the more you think about things in an agitated way, the more stressed you become. The less you do, the better you feel. That's because when we're not thinking in an agitated way and our mind is free to calibrate on its own, it calibrates to ease and clarity. So as soon as you stop worrying about your deadline, your mind clears and you can get on with your work. So the clearing of our mind is a default. So instead of having to manage stress, if you can start to consider that it's just an experience of your own thinking, and it's not helpful thinking. So we also know that the more stressed someone is, the worse they'll be at whatever it is they're doing. Because the agitation is a mental distraction. It uses bandwidth that would otherwise be focused on what you're doing. So if you can see that stress is coming from you, and if it doesn't go in one ear and out the other, like the hunger thought, it's because you're thinking it, and that causes chronic stress. And you can do that at home over the weekend, or you can do that at work. It's got nothing to do with your actual demands of your life, whether it be your job, your family, or anything else. And if you can see that, and you can see that it's not productive thought, you start to be willing to consider it's something you don't need to worry about. You don't need to focus about. And you'll start to see all that thinking fade into the background of your mind. And to the foreground comes a lot of clarity and ease and a neutral mind. And you'll discover you can have a neutral, unstressed mind in any circumstance if you're willing to ignore your agitated thinking. And by agitated thinking, I mean the thoughts that pop in and make you feel like that. That's not a call to action. You don't have to start thinking. And once you experiment with that and you see that, you'll start to experience that your level of stress can vary in ways you wouldn't have thought possible. You can leave your work at work. You don't have to worry about it at home. And not only don't you have to, it won't help you. So once you start to see that stress is an experience of an agitated state of mind, and an agitated state of mind is what you do to your mind when you're overthinking things, particularly in an anxious way, you'll start to realize it's a variable. So you can have the same life circumstances and have stress come in and out of your mind. You can't stop it coming in and out, but you don't have to foster it. And then you also realize you don't need to manage it. Because if it's your thinking, you're generating it and managing it. You got twice the workload. Whereas if you can see you don't need to generate it, or if you are generating it, you don't have to take it seriously. It's one of the other things about stress when we don't see it's a state of mind is we take it too seriously. And once you start to experiment with this and see this, and you can also learn more about state of mind by listening to more of this material, you'll discover that stress is more optional than you thought previously, and your ability to have clarity of mind and ease in challenging circumstances is an easier thing to achieve than you thought possible.